Support for this podcast comes from UTSA. UTSA's graduate school has a top-tier program for your field of study and offers outstanding opportunities for hands-on research and scholarly publishing. The academic community of UTSA features a world-class faculty, a professional development center, and mentoring programs to contribute to your future success. UTSA, the University of Texas at San Antonio. Visit utsa.edu/graduate to learn more or apply.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we've got another great show for you this week. My guest today is Lark Baxter, a current coach at the IMG Academy, but boy, does Lark have a lot of experience in the world of junior tennis and all different facets of it, and I'm really excited to have her on today to talk about the different pieces of her career in our great sport and other aspects of her life in tennis as well. Before I bring Lark on, though, I just want to remind you guys to be sure to check out ParentingAces.com. We've got lots of new information on the site. And also, if you're not doing so already, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Google+, and all the various social media outlets so that you don't miss anything. There is a lot of information that I wind up posting on our Facebook page or tweeting out or retweeting out that doesn't necessarily make it to ParentingAces.com, and a lot of it is very useful information to parents, to coaches, to players, and so I wouldn't want y'all to miss any of that. So hopefully, if you're not already, you will jump right on all those various social media outlets and give us a follow, and make sure you stay in the loop on all things junior tennis, college tennis, recruiting, our young guns on the Pro Tour. I mean, there's all sorts of great information out there. So without further ado, let me bring Lark Baxter on the line. Let me just get her connected here. Lark, are you with us?
Yes, good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I know you are crazy busy down in Florida, and just so grateful to you for taking an hour out of your schedule to be with us and share your interesting background and experience in tennis. I'm looking very forward to chatting with you and learning more about all the things that you've been involved in.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your show today.
Absolutely.
And,
so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that we just finished the Eddie Herr International Tournament at IMG, and so I know the kids are all kind of finishing up and getting ready for the Orange Bowl. We had some players at Little Mmoh, so yeah, when you said I know you're crazy busy, we really are. But this is a great time of year for our players to be competing.
Absolutely. Well, not so great up in Atlanta where I am. It's cold and rainy today. So I hope y'all are having better weather down there.
We should have had a live broadcast down here in Sarasota. It's absolutely beautiful today.
Yeah, I'm jealous, that's for sure.
You're invited anytime.
Thank you. Before we jump into what you are currently doing at IMG, because I know my listeners are interested in hearing about that, I would love for you to share with us how you were involved in tennis as a child and what role tennis played in your life growing up.
Okay, yeah, sure. My father loved tennis, and my mother was a professional ballet dancer. So when we moved to Sarasota, my father settled and he started his practice here. There were actually no full-time teaching tennis pros in Sarasota. It was more seasonal. So I was one of 6 children, and we were very, like a lot of, families, big families. We were all very rambunctious and had a lot of energy. So my father really wanted to start us off in tennis lessons, and my mom, of course, wanted the girls in the family to take ballet lessons. So the first thing my dad did was to get together with some other tennis parents and hire a full-time teaching pro, and which we did. And then, so we started taking lessons, and then my mom was, she was a professional ballet dancer, as I mentioned, and she wanted a full-time ballet teacher for us, and she couldn't find one that was in the method that she had learned in Great Britain. She had learned from a very distinguished long line of ballet schools in England, which one of them is Sadler Wells, and she was a professional ballet dancer by 12, so she knew the importance of technique. And so my sisters and I started taking ballet and tennis together at the same time. And in my family, it was just, that was what we did. We all got together and played tennis. We traveled to tennis tournaments on the weekends. In the summers, I had teaching pro jobs, first at my club, and then my sister was a little bit older than I was, and she was working for a tennis coach by the name of Dennis Vandermeer, and he would have assignments all over the world. So at a very young age, even at 17, I was, I spent a summer in Spain teaching tennis and playing on the Spanish circuit with my older sister. And so I feel like for me, tennis has always been something I've enjoyed. I've competed in it, and I've also always had summer jobs and eventually started my full-time career right out of college in tennis. So that's a little bit about my background. And
so you said your dad was an avid player. I read also he was a physician, right?
Yes, he was a radiologist, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so you and I have that in common. That's really funny.
Oh, really?
My dad's a doctor as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you have any vivid memories of how your parents were involved in your tennis in your junior years. Were they, hands-on tennis parents? Did they just kind of let you do your thing, or was there a mix of that? How did that work in your family?
Yeah, as having fathers that were physicians, you know how busy they are. So I think my parents were content knowing that we were sort of self-driven and we were playing tennis and being active. So when it came to competition and my parents' involvement, they were pretty much hands-off. They were just happy knowing that we were doing something that we all loved doing, and we were with a good group of people. So now I think, it depends, of course, in a family which child you talk to. My parents were pretty relaxed with me. I think they were a little more strict with my older siblings, So my mom, she was a very good sport. She would come and watch matches, and she loved to read, so she'd bring a book, but a lot of times we noticed that she would be reading the book upside down. So being, as a ballet dancer, she was competitive, and she could see, when our matches were going up and down. So I would just say my mom was just a really good sport. And my dad, when he was around, he was a little more of a tennis dad, that kind of tennis dad that, he could get a little bit excited and, annoyed, and, he would run the gamut. But that's more my older siblings' kind of impression of him. I think, with me, he was just pretty relaxed. Yeah. And that's I think, great. I had older siblings that were, I would travel with them to tennis tournaments and, teaching pro jobs and things like that. So we were more of a team, I would say. Yeah.
That's really nice. So after school, did you play college tennis?
No, I was offered scholarship to University of Alabama. And I was very tempted to go, but I just had this dream as a young child. I went to tennis camp up in New York, upstate New York, and I had a friend that was my roommate, and she lived in the New York, New Jersey area, and they introduced me to New York City, I think at about the age of 10. After camp one year, they said, come with us and spend another few weeks. And so I ended up going to New York University, and my goal was to become a sports journalist. And so I did not play college tennis. It's probably a regret that I have, but I did, end up with a really great career in tennis. So, I guess we can say that, really there are no regrets. But I do miss that, the experience of playing, college team tennis. I think it would have been a great memory for me to have. And I certainly encourage all my students to try and play college tennis as well. It's completely different from junior tennis, and just, yeah.
Okay. And so after school, you went to work for Prince, and you had a pretty interesting gig with them. So I'd love for you to share what that job was, what your role was, and the things that you learned from that job that kind of catapulted you to the next stage of your career.
Yeah, sure. Well, you have to kind of go backwards a little bit and remember that when I was coming on to the corporate tennis scene in the 80s, Prince was really kind of it was innovative, and not everybody was on board with the large size rackets, and there was still quite a bit of controversy around it. And so at the time, Prince was looking really, they had a very good marketing idea, and that was to, instead of everyone considering that Prince was kind of this weekend duffer racket, just for kind of weekend, hackers and all that. I mean, I hate to say that word, but that's kind of what the impression was, that it was just something was kind of for weekend players. So they really wanted to go after a dynamic group of opinion leaders. And so I was hired. My sister was already at Prince, and I was hired to really recruit a group of players that were 10 to 12, 12 to 14, the younger players. And with the idea that if we got all these dynamic players and they were playing all over the country and all over the world, it would really be great marketing for our company. It would change our image, our company image, and the sort of the negative image that Prince had at the time. And so I remember that I was hired right out of college, and my first assignment was to go to the Sport Goofy tournament, which was in Orlando, and to try and, discover basically some really good talent. And the Sport Goofy was, I believe, sort of 10 and under and 12 and under, if I have it right in my mind. And the neat thing about Disney was that they had really foreseen this whole idea that, kids really needed to be moving around and being active. And they were kind of a leader in this, let's get kids moving and try and, I think they were really leading the message of, healthy kids and avoiding obesity at a young age. And they were very ahead at the time, I have to say that. So they had started not just for tennis, but for every sport. They invited the top sort of junior players in every soccer, tennis, everything, golf. They invited them all to come into Orlando, and they invited one boy, one girl, and a coach, and they flew everybody in. So I remember being down at Disney and showing up this tournament, and there's not really a blueprint, that you're given. This is how you recruit players. But having grown up in tennis, I was comfortable around tennis players, certainly. But I do remember kind of that thought one day where I woke up in the morning and thought, oh my gosh, I have a real job. And I need to perform. And I remember I almost felt overwhelmed. Like, what do I do now? How do I approach kids? How do I approach parents? I just really remember this nervous feeling to the point where I wanted to reach for the phone. I think I did. I reached for the phone, and I got a hold of the receptionist of our player development department, and I really wanted to say, I don't think I can do this. But something made me kind of just put down the phone. I remember hanging up the phone and thinking, I will just show up at the tournament and do what I know how to do. I'll talk to the tournament director. I'll get some draw sheets. I will just move around these tennis courts and figure it out. The best thing I knew to do was just to be where I needed to be, which was obviously the tennis facilities. And I'm so happy that I did not make that call, or I made the call. I'm so happy I hung up the phone. And just followed that formula, which was, show up, get some draw sheets, get acquainted with players and where they're from, and talk to coaches. And that's eventually what I ended up doing. I ended up I remember standing behind the court watching a young girl play, and I just knew the way she hit the ball was completely different from, probably most of the kids out there. And I ended up talking to her coach, and her coach was Patricio Ape. He's one of the first professional coaches I met. And he was the coach of, I don't know if you remember, Gabriella Sabatini.
Sure.
And so we struck up a conversation and developed a good working relationship. And so I wrote her name down, and then I was watching another match and talking to some parents, and they were like, you need to watch this little girl play. She's from which is at the time the former Yugoslavia. She's very young. She's playing the number one player from the U.S., quite a bit older, 12-year-old player, but she's only 7, 8, or 9. I can't remember. I think she was maybe 9. And she probably won't win, but she will be worth you, getting up early and going and watching her match, which I did. And of course, that was Monica Seles. And I just remember her big smile, and her parents were very, very nice. And so developed a relationship with her, a good working relationship with her, and then went to a little bit later to the boys, and there was Michael Chang and Andre, and I think they were good friends at the time. I remember them being together, and both of them just having these big grins on their face and just these happy kids. So my first week at Prince, I recruited four players, and 3 of those 4 became number 1 in the world, and of course, Michael, no one got closer to be number 1 in the world than Michael Chang. But it was interesting because to be with a group of players just starting out and be able to follow their journey through, completing international junior tennis and then on to the pros, and, getting to know the team that they develop relationships with, their agents and their parents and their coaches. And so I certainly got a great introduction, into player development, and working with world-class players very, very early in my career.
I know my listeners would love to hear from you. What is it that you saw in those 4 at such a young age that made you feel like they had a big future in the sport, that they were going to, quote, make it? Because I think parents ask that question all the time, their kids winning matches and winning tournaments, and, in their mind, maybe their child has what it takes to go all the way in the sport. But I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective of what it is you saw that week.
Yeah, I know. I'm certainly asked that question, more a question of, do you think my child has this talent, or, what do you think? And what I would say was that what I saw was a lot of just positive feedback from their coaches, certainly from their coaches. And I think it's important, a coach will give you a balanced opinion about their player. And so I could tell with these 4 players, I mean, their coach and their parent, they were very enthusiastic because I think they had a sense that this is really what their kids wanted, With Sabatini, I remember I was watching her play, and Monica Seles, watching them both play their matches. I just sort of met Michael and Andre after their match and was talking to them. But I would first, going player by player. I remember seeing Sabatini and just watching her. The way she struck the ball was amazing for her age, and she was so, graceful, and she had that one-handed backhand, and you could just tell that she was a great athlete. And then speaking with her coach, and then her coach, gave me a kind of an outline. They had an outline for her. They knew that she was talented, and they knew that she had what it would take to get to a high level of international junior tennis, and then onto the pros. They had it all planned out for her, really, so that was then it was just a matter of having her endorse our rackets and see if she liked them, which she did, and then it was just a matter of watching her progress, which she did. She just progressed forward, and she pretty much followed the roadmap that Patricio had in mind for her. He kind of knew the stages that she would go through. She would get to a top level in the International Junior Tennis Federation rankings, and then she would become, top 50 in the world, top 20, top 10. They had that insight into her game. With Monica, watching her play, it was like watching no other player that I have ever seen play. She was such a fighter. She was so aggressive. She had those angles. It was an amazing event to watch her play that match, and she won. She ended up beating the number one junior player from the United States. And so, you have those are successes and results. And then again, her parents and her coaches, everyone was on board with Monica. It was a team. And then with Andre and Michael, they were just, you could tell they were just really happy kids. They were loving being where they were. They were at this big tournament, this big arena, and they were just really happy with it. And again, Michael's parents, who I got to know really, really well, they were and his brother, they were a team. This was Michael's dream. They knew he had talent, and they were going to make sure that he went to all the right tournaments that he needed to go to, and had everything that he needed to follow this dream that he had. And I would say, the same for Andre. You could just tell his talent was just always there, and he just, he, of course, he had some ups and downs in his career, but he always managed to, right himself up, and so I was part of a team of those four players' teams, and it was a real privilege.
So what does it mean that Prince offered a sponsorship to them and that they endorsed the racket? What did that look like? Because I remember when I was a kid playing juniors, it was a big deal. We had a couple players at our club that were very high level, and, they were on the free list for racket companies. And
right.
I'm not sure that exists anymore. But so what did it look like in the 80s? And maybe you can compare that to what it means now for a player to have a sponsorship from one of the manufacturers.
Yeah, well, you are exactly correct. It is. These are different times now. When I started with Prince in the 80s, we were all competing head to head. It was Prince, Head, Wilson, Nike. Just an interesting aside, I remember going to the Orange Bowl very early in the 80s and walking around the courts. I had my Prince bag, and we were just coming on the scene, and as well as Nike was, which shocks people. And believe it or not, I walked around the Orange Bowl with a Nike rep, and to say that you probably couldn't give away a pair of Nike shoes or a Nike outfit at the time is not an exaggeration. Everybody at the time was wearing Fila and Ales, and it was just, it was really interesting. But of course, within a few years, the Nike rep couldn't even come out of his suite. He was so, Nike was so, coveted at the time, But it just goes to show. And now, who would ever have thought that anyone could give Nike a run for the money? And of course, Under Armour is right there. So you just never know. There are a lot of trends in tennis. But in the 80s, we were a group of player development reps representing, Wilson, Head, Prince, myself with Prince, my sister, Sam McCleary, and we traveled to all the junior tournaments and all the Grand Slams, and it was really, I think Prince also had a lot of extra services that we were able to provide. We provided our players with stringing service, free stringing service. We were very hands-on. We made sure that all our players had, enough rackets, enough string. We considered, for us, the under 18, the college players, they were just great ambassadors for us. They all, after tournaments, traveled back to their respective clubs, and they were seen with, our products and doing well, and, represented us well as ambassadors. So now I think there are not as large of free list programs as back in the 80s, So I would say that was the difference. We were just we sponsored 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s, juniors. We also had international juniors, and of course we had guidelines for each of those divisions. And then we had our touring pros, and it was just it was a very exciting time. It was very dynamic.
You mentioned guidelines. Were the guidelines results based? Were they behavior based? Were there other obligations that the players had?
Yeah, there were combinations of that. We had ranking guidelines, and so we had national ranking guidelines, and by sections we had guidelines. We also had a player development program where kids could also get reduced pricing as well. And then we went by, in college tennis, we had collegiate rankings, individual rankings, and team rankings. Yeah. So, I mean, it was.
And what about the behavior?
Yes, we had sportsmanships. We had each player sign a sportsmanship pledge, and we definitely had expectations about how kids conducted themselves on the court.
Without naming any names, was there ever a time that you had to rescind sponsorship?
Oh, yeah, I can remember. And I was also the player development rep for squash. So I can remember. And in the same, point, squash also had a very high level of junior competition. And I can remember walking into, not the locker room, but the player lounge where a player had just smashed 6 of his squash rackets. I can remember that. And, that was something I had to address at the time. I mean, I've seen that happen in tennis as well, 6 broken rackets right there, one after the other. It's unfortunate, but, tempers get away from us, and so we there would definitely be repercussions to that kind of behavior. Absolutely.
It's funny because every time we see a pro on TV engage in these epic racket smashes, it makes the rounds on YouTube and whatever. There's always that question of is this good for the racket manufacturer? Like, is this good publicity for them, or is it an embarrassment for them?
When I see it, I just immediately think of young kids, young tennis players, and I just don't like them to see it. I just don't like our tennis kids, our youth, witnessing that. It's not good behavior in any shape or form, and I don't think a racket company would really, from my experience, that is not behavior you want to see anyone exhibit.
So after your stint at Prince, you moved to California, if I'm not mistaken, and went to work for Mizuno, and I would love to hear about what that looked like.
Yeah, I was offered a position heading up the American operations for player development for Mizuno, which is a Japanese company, and I felt like it was just a great opportunity, and it was exciting, and so I really enjoyed Mizuno. They were a great company to work for, and it I traveled to Japan several times, and it was just very interesting working for a non-American company. I think Mizuno is considered the largest sporting goods company in the world. So it was so exciting to go to Japan and be invited into their culture, really their world, and have that experience. And they have all their own factories in Japan, and so it was amazing to me to be invited into their factories and see the way that they conducted their business and their manufacturing, and they were so involved with every sport and the Olympics. It was very exciting. It was a great company to work for as well. I've been lucky.
It's interesting.
I've only worked for. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I
was going to say I've been so lucky to work for so many just amazing companies. Yeah.
Sure. And, I mean, what's interesting to me is you keep using the term player development in relation to your jobs, and you're using it in a very different context than I'm used to hearing it because, as a parent, I'm used to hearing player development in relation to USTA and, developing young players through the juniors into the pros. You're using it from a manufacturer standpoint, but also a coaching standpoint, I think. Maybe you can help me understand that a little better.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is that, at Prince, we really did consider ourselves player development. I mean, I think if you were to ask some of the players, and I hear from my past players that I work with at Prince, I hear from them on Facebook, and they send me these great messages. And we really did become part of their family, and we became part of their team. And so it really was about, advising them. To me, player development is with Prince was really being able to advise players, certainly about their equipment, and there's a lot that goes into it for a player. And we had so many different kinds of rackets to offer, and based on their game and their technique. And so I see it as an advisory capacity, and also what's the best for the player. A lot of times they would talk to us about college and college coaches, and we had, because we travel a lot and we interface with so many opinion leaders in the industry, a lot of college coaches, a lot of sports agents, a lot of tournament directors. I mean, we really were there to be able to advise not just our players, but their parents as well. So that I see as, and then of course at IMG, now I'm more capacity as a tennis coach. And I feel like, all my experience, the last 30 years plays into being able to advise parents who are just starting out with their young players. They're just starting out this tennis junior thing, So I'm able to, I think, just give them some good advice as well as about, how do you navigate it? I get that question quite a bit. All the questions you just asked me, do you think my child has talent? What do you think? A lot goes into being able to develop a junior athlete, a young athlete. A lot goes into it.
Sure. So you're at IMG now, and as you mentioned, as a coach, and for me, when I hear IMG, I immediately think sports agent. But IMG has expanded well beyond simply being an agency. There's now academies for not just tennis, for many, many sports. And a good friend of mine is a coach at IMG Academy. So I've talked to him a bit about his experience there, and it's very interesting to me that a company that started out representing players has morphed, or I won't say morphed, but really gradually kind of moved into player development in the more traditional sense of the word in terms of coaching players and guiding players. So Can you talk a little bit about how the coaching side at IMG Academy works with the agency side, maybe, the interactions that the players have with both pieces of the puzzle, how the coaches work with the agents, for the best interest of the players, et cetera?
Well, of course, I think what you're referring to is International Management Group, which was started by Mark McCormick, his law firm, and he was the first visionary, really, to see the sports athlete in there. He was the first to envision this ongoing career for athletes, not just in their sport, but outside the arena, endorsing other products and as well as supermodels. And so, of course, IMG purchased Nick Bolliettieri Tennis Academy many years ago, and of course recently we were also purchased by William Morris Agency. So as far as the interfacing with sports agents, really what from Nick Bolliettieri Tennis Academy to IMG and now to William Morris Agency, what we have at IMG is we just have it is a full facility offering everything a young athlete needs to aspire to their dreams. And if their dreams are to be, improve their junior tennis or to get to the college level or to the pro level, that's what we're there to develop. I wouldn't say that we actually interface with agents and our young players like that. We really are, we're all coaches. We're on the court daily with the kids, developing them, and really working with the kids to see, what is their dream? Is your dream to be pro? Is it to go for college? So we're there helping them, and from there we're able to, introduce them to, colleges. We have college coaches that come recruit at our academy, and but our emphasis is just that. It's just really, finding out the individual desires of our kids. And so when I say we are a full facility, we have daily, along with their 3 hours of sport, whatever their sport is, obviously we have tennis, we have baseball, we have soccer, we have football, we have track and field, we have lacrosse. So each student has their, 3 hours of tennis, plus they have another hour of fitness that's designed to their sport. And then we also have mental conditioning classes, and we have speed training, and we have tournaments that are held at IMG. We have everything there that a player needs. So, of course, when a player wants, and shows signs of succeeding, going through the international tennis circuit, we now have the number one ITF player. Then, of course, they are going to meet the agents and work with the agents. But, does that answer your question?
Somewhat. And so I guess what you're saying is until a player reaches kind of the highest levels of the sport, the agents really are not part of the picture.
Right. We have agents that are at the academy because they are working with the world-class players that we have there, which we have many that come and train there every day. So, but a young player, I work with kids as young as 8, 9, 10, they're as a student athlete.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And I know,
but they're in that environment. Mm-hmm.
Right.
They're in the environment every day of seeing professional players practicing on the court. It's not just tennis players, but we have the football Columbine. We have professional basketball teams that come and practice. We have soccer. So that's another amazing facet of IMG Academy. Every day you're surrounded by these world-class athletes and their teams, and it's really inspiring to be in that environment. Especially, you can imagine as a young as a young kid, 8, 9, 10, and you see some of your sports heroes walking around with you. There was a cute story over the summer. We have summer camps, and one of my students, he was playing ping pong. We have our cafeteria, and we have table tennis and in the cafeteria, and he was so excited because we had a lot of the Olympians training this summer. We had the New Zealand Olympic team, and we had the Australian, and he was playing ping pong with one of the Olympians. He was like 9 years old. He was so excited. But I mean, isn't that great just to be able to interface with these
Absolutely.
athletes like that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had the opportunity to talk with some of the teenage tennis players and their families, the ones who are at the top of the game, who are kind of at that cusp of, do I turn pro? Do I go to college?
Yeah.
And there's this whole question of representation. And to be clear, once a player signs with an agent, they relinquish their ability to play. They're no longer NCAA eligible. They can play at the NAIA level, but they cannot play NCAA tennis if they've signed with representation. And so we've heard stories over the years of players who have kind of gone that route. They've signed with an agency. They've tried their hand at the tour. It didn't work out for whatever reason. And they come back and they play NAIA tennis and have these phenomenal college tennis careers, which is really cool. So I think there's some confusion, though, that, when a player says, I'm turning pro, what that actually means, because it doesn't necessarily mean they've signed with an agency. Not every professional athlete has an agency willing to take them on. And so I think that's important for listeners to understand that. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like how, when you were with Prince or when you were with Mizuno, that's not agency representation, but you're in that same realm.
Yeah.
How does an agency decide if a player is worthy of representation?
Yeah. Well, obviously when I was with Mizuno and Prince, there's been changes and everything. Our format was once a player had signed with an agent, that generally meant that agent was going to then establish them with a tennis company, a shoe company, a clothing and shoe company, and so therefore they would be endorsing products. They would sign a contract, and therefore they would be paid. They would be paid retainers, and they would be paid bonuses. So they would be accepting money. And that was the definition. Once that had happened, once you accepted signed a contract and were endorsing products and then being paid, retained, then you were a pro, and you relinquished your amateur status. So
Got it.
now, So nowadays, you can turn pro. Say you're turning pro, but unless you sign with, you sign a contract where you are endorsing and being paid for products and paid bonuses and accepting prize money. Yeah.
Got it. And I mean, it's a process. It's not something that, just happens overnight for the majority of players. Of course, there are always those outliers who, are being sought after by the sports agents and are offered multiple options. But for a lot of these young players, they may go a while before they have actual representation and are receiving actual endorsement money.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think, the trend now also is really to go to college, at least try it for a year or two, or, even graduate. I mean, we've had some outstanding players at IMG that have gone through 4 years of college and won the NCAAs, and and then are on the circuit. So I like the trend now. I think the trend now is back in the 80s it was if you think about Jennifer Capriati and these young players, they were I remember sort of hearing these conversations where they were saying at 14, 15 years old a girl needs to turn professional, she'll lose out. So I don't think that's the thinking as much. It's not the standard thinking. Now I think that it's really about go to college, try collegiate tennis. Collegiate tennis is an amazing experience for a player and in the development of their game. So that's a trend I'm picking up on now and seeing now. Certainly at IMG, we encourage that as well.
Well, that's good to hear. It's interesting. I was at an event out in California a couple months ago and had an opportunity to sit in on a session where Tracy Austin and Lindsay Davenport were talking about their careers in tennis, and there was a whole Q&A, and somebody asked them if they regretted not playing college tennis, and my ears perked up when that question came. And Lindsay Davenport said she really feels like she missed out on a valuable experience by not playing college tennis, by going straight pro. Tracy Austin, on the other hand, whose son is now playing for USC, said she has zero regrets. She never had any desire to play college tennis, doesn't feel like she missed out on anything, is happy to have her son playing, and, feels like that was the right move for him. But for her, she has no regrets. So it was very interesting to hear the two different opinions. Right.
Yeah, which is why, going back to our conversation, about collegiate tennis, I was we just had the Eddie Herr, and as I mentioned, we had a lot of college coaches there recruiting, and I happened to run into a friend of mine who is the head tennis coach of USC, and he was sharing with me that, now it's possible for a player to college, and then if they decide that they want to go pro, they can try that, and if they don't feel like they've had the success, or if they feel that calling to go back to college, then there are opportunities now where they can go back and finish college, which I think is great.
Right, but to be clear, they cannot play. They can't play college tennis if they've relinquished their amateur status. Yeah,
right. What
I just want to make that clear to listeners.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that rule has not changed.
But I think it's for a player who goes out on the tour and then wants to come back and finish college, and have that opportunity is I think is definitely a step in the right direction.
Sure, and I mean to take that a step further, and I've talked about this before, the college coaches, some of them now are making it part of their scholarship package offer to the top players. And I want to make it very, very clear. If your child is top 20, maybe. If they're top 50 or below, no, this is not something that's going to happen for them. But the tip-top players, some of the more elite college programs are making it part of the package that you come play for us for at least a year or at least 2 years or whatever they specify, and we will cover your college expenses if you decide to go on the tour and then come back to school.
Yes.
But that,
you're right. It is
again, that is
yes.
And I want to stress that word, elite.
Yes.
An elite.
Yes.
Based on ranking, not based on mom and dad think they have, the next Steve Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the takeaway here is just, now the trend is to, really have that collegiate experience, not just, as player development, to develop your game, whereas back in the 80s, everyone was thinking, no, it's, a waste of time, but now completely different, now you can really sort of, have that, now it's encouraged. So I think I like that idea.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to digress for just a minute because we're coming to the end of our hour.
Okay.
I read somewhere that you're also an artist, and I've actually gotten to see some of your paintings online. So how did you get, so Mom was a ballet dancer in the arts.
Professional.
So I get that you kind of got that gene, but how did you get involved in painting?
How did I get involved in it? It's interesting. I think I had an art dealer who studied genetics, and he said, you are what you are. He goes, Lark, somewhere in your family there are artists, and of course on my mother's side of the family, all artists, all highly trained artists from England, and very skilled. And for me, it was it's kind of interesting. It was a little bit of a negative but a positive. I grew up in this very interesting waterside home in Sarasota, and we had a fire, and the whole house was destroyed within a few hours. And I remember thinking, I was pregnant at the time with my daughter, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I will never be able to show her what it was like to grow up in this amazing coastal city in Sarasota, and being out on the water a lot and seeing the wildlife and all the natural wildlife here, and just really enjoying. I really, as a child, really enjoyed growing up here in Florida. And I just remember sort of, kind of being really shocked, number one, that, everything we had was gone, but also the memory of it. How am I going to show my daughter what it was like to have this experience of being able to explore? And so I just started painting these small little beads that I would make, with palm trees. And then someone said, oh, would you think about putting those beads on a frame? And so I put them on the frame, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just create the painting in the frame. And I was driving her to school one day. She was in preschool, and there was a restaurant that had a marquee outside that said "Artists Needed." So I thought, well, when I drop her off, I will, venture back there and see exactly what they're talking. Now you have to keep in mind, I hadn't really painted one painting yet. I just had these strings of beads. So I went in there, and I said, here, I have all these beads, and I'd like to, paint some things on your walls. And they were like, interesting. Not really what we had in mind. We just had in mind, an artist to come in and put up paintings, and then, have the opportunity to sell them to our customers. So I thought, okay. So they gave me a date, which was about 6 months from the date that I was in there. And I painted something like 19 or 20 paintings because I needed a goal, being in tennis,
sure.
You have these goals. So that was my goal. And I did. I painted 19 or 20 paintings, put them up in this restaurant, had this show, and they were all paintings, though, of my memories of Florida and exploring and being able to show my daughter what it was like. And so that's kind of how I started, from kind of a negative, a big fire, to, really something I'm very passionate about now.
That's really cool. Very coul.
Oh, thank you.
So I love that. Well, it's one of the goals of Parenting Aces, I guess, since you're talking about goals, is to help parents understand what tennis can lead to in their child's life. That it's not just about what you accomplish on the court, but how you can use your life in tennis to have success in other areas. And so, I think it's really important for people to understand that, and I love that you made that connection that, in tennis, we always had to have a goal. And so as a painter, I needed to have this goal. And, I think it's good for parents to understand that these skills that their kids are learning are transferable across so many different pathways, and it's not just about being a professional tennis player or being a teaching pro or having a job, anything that's tennis related. you can go on to be a success as an artist, as a doctor, a lawyer, an inventor. I mean, there's so many different avenues that tennis can aid in, and so I thank you for making that connection. I think that was very cool. So you're now you're working as a coach. You're in Florida. You're at IMG. You've just been part of this international highest level tournament, Daddy Her. Did you see anybody at the tournament that that we need to be paying attention to, and maybe some names to watch as these kids develop? Because the Eddie Her has all the age groups. It's not just the ITF event, but the younger kids are there as well. And I'd love to hear if you saw anybody that you think has that it factor.
Well, what I'm focusing on now, of course, are my students and our students at our academy, and for us, we're able to introduce our kids to an ITF level 1 tournament, that experience. And they're able to start very young, kind of getting their feet wet a little bit slowly. So they have this opportunity to gradually, to expand into this high level tennis. So what our kids were able, some of our kids were given wild cards, and they progressed through the wild cards, and they were given they got into the qualifying, and then they qualified and got into the main draw. And then some of our players were given main draw, you qualified for main draw and won matches. So I saw the progress of our young players, which are 8 to 12. We have, we already have, with Michael Mmoh, recently turned pro and is, highly ranked ITF, 1 or 2. We have a whole list, but my eye is on our younger players that are having this opportunity to develop, gradually through the system. So that's where my attention is.
What will you be watching for over the next few weeks as a coach of these young players after they've had this experience of watching and or playing against these very, very high level competitors? What are you looking for them to have learned from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a great question, and I think that question comes to the heart of it. And, you hear a lot of coaches say, who wants it the most, who's willing to put the work in. And so what I'm really looking for my coaches, for my kids coming back is, not just the time and effort they put on the court, and the sweat and the desire, but, into everything that they have, into their fitness. You really want to be that kid that comes to fitness and is ready to, really grind it out. Because when you grind it out, your off-court fitness training, you're going to grind it out on the tennis court. So I'm really looking for a recommitment to a game, and, just for them to see the hard work that you have to put in every day. And from there, we have student athletes. Our kids are, full-time school at IMG, and we really are strict about our school. And so we have kids that, they're from being on the court and practice and fitness, and then they have their classes. We're looking for that same commitment with them for their schoolwork as well. And that gets back to what you're saying is, it's not just about the sport. It's also about being student athletes, and, the discipline that you have in your sport is going to translate into the discipline you have in your schoolwork, and all this is so cohesive, and then from there you're going to be disciplined in your career. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a recommitment from my students when they finish Little Mmoh, when they finish Orange Bowl, and they come back in January, to be really committed to the daily work, and to really love it as well. The fun are the drills and the everything that you have to put into your day every day.
Right. Well, That sounds great. I love that. And Lark, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and taking time to share your experiences with us. It's really interesting to hear about your background and how you got to where you are today at IMG. So thank you for that. And to my listeners, I hope you've learned something today. That's the goal. Going back to that goal thing, that's the goal with Parenting Aces, is to help us all do better as tennis parents and do better by our kids. And so, Lark, thank you. And I'm thrilled to talk with you and look forward to having you on again in the future.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I really enjoyed it as well. And I'd like to say happy holidays to all the parents and to you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Support for this podcast comes from UTSA's Graduate School, which has a top-tier program for your field of study and outstanding opportunities for hands-on research and scholarly publishing. The University of Texas at San Antonio. Visit utsa.edu/graduate to learn more or apply.